And so, turning to Jamarhl now, I mean, your role, I think you see your role a slightly different way, but you've seen a lot of these same challenges, certainly, that Maggie and Bill brought up.
I was glad that she, broke the ice on having a dark view of data and battles with city and state governments. So that's good. First of all the presenters really love this stuff. I'm like in my own little nerd heaven here, because this is how we got into this stuff, because we like this type of stuff. Where other people are running away from these big reports and all that, we kind of like it. And there's some people in the room, who kind of we started off with as well in our first times of not maybe first, but times of tackling data. Cornell Mills in the back was one of my partners, as well as State Representative Carlos Enriquez. Thank you for coming. Who both have worked with me at times when we're going through crunching, all the data that goes into campaigns and elections. Cornell ran against the current city councilor in District 7, where I live in Roxbury, and we also did a report on how that candidate, Councilor Tito Jackson, was spending his money and where he was spending it and all that. You will see a newspaper in the back there on 3 strikes. In which we kind of visualized a lot of the stuff, and then too, this guy up front here, Jacob Lidoff, and I would really like, because Jacob is my secret weapon. A lot of people don't get to meet him, and I unfairly get to take a lot of the credit. He makes me look like a genius. But Jacob, please, raise your hand, stand up, give this man some applause, because this is the guy here. He's been with me since he's been 17 years old. Now 24, a graduate of Boston University and whatnot, and he is the guy that the team of us, I usually find this stuff and say, what the heck is this, and how can we make this look good? And then, we go into this process. It's a lot of 3 in the morning, late nights, and so on and so forth. But as I said, the presentations were excellent. I look forward, I'm excited by what this data is going to mean. Oftentimes, too, we find that data is either a weapon or a tool. For instance, Mr. Oates, I knew your name. It's glad to put a face with a name, because you're on my little data sheet here of diversity in Boston city governments, where we did a breakdown after hearing Mayor Menino and Commissioner Ed Davis talking with various community groups and saying how diverse the city is. And that's another little spin I just want to put on it, because in all these things that I saw tonight, and pardon me for being a contrarian, but in all these things, and we talked about this in our conversation, think with the mind of a 41-year-old black guy who comes from, quote unquote, the hood in Roxbury. How many times do I get to see myself in any of this, right? So even when you're going around town and you're asking people, hey, do you enjoy the Boston Commons? There's like never a black person there. When you see the little slides in there, it's like, man, never ever. So a lot of times when we look at some of these issues, and I'm looking at numbers oftentimes, I'm using it as a tool to agitate a situation, illuminate something, bring something out. One of the things that we looked at, and I'm still, if anybody in this room, and I'm interested in making connections at the reception, can help to get this stuff, because between the FOIAs and the expense that they put on you, it makes it impossible. And then certain people, Boston police or whoever, just have the right to tell you flat out, no, that matter's still open. You can't get that, all right? But we've been trying to get the data of all the people who are killed by the police in Boston. Now, what we do have is already overwhelming, because I can tell you it's only Black, Latino, and Cape Verdean people. But to get not only that, the simple thing, who got killed, but who killed them? What officer was it? Was it a white officer? Was it a female officer? Because I would bet that the data would show that female officers don't go around killing people that much. Was it an Asian officer? Were they 35? Were they 60? Did they live in Boston? You see what I mean? So all the stuff, it's like layers of an onion, being peeled away. And that's why I'm very excited about this, because of the way that you can, look at different things and kind of you can make it into what you want. And I don't think that, like a lot of things that people end up creating, I don't think you guys anticipated what you may have unleashed here and the wackiness that will ensue. But that's my spiel. I do want people, though, at some point, come up and check out this City of Boston diversity chart, as well as the one that we also did on the Boston Police. I think it's telling. I think it's some of our best work, along with the three strike stuff. And once again, we use this information to try to push an agenda, to illuminate, to highlight, and cause mayhem.
Thank you. So, I know we're really tight on time here, but I just wanted to take a moment to ask kind of a couple sort of lightning round questions to the panel. And the first one is, who's doing it? I mean, other than you, because obviously, within your organizations, you're all doing perfect work. Who's doing it right? Who are the folks that you look to and say, here are some interesting people doesn't have to be media necessarily, who are using data in different ways and community information that folks should be kind of looking towards as well.
I guess I'll go first. I don't know if this is, yeah, it's fine. The Texas Tribune, which is an online publication, which started probably about 3 years ago, and they took off like a rocket primarily because of the data stories that they were telling. They do a lot of data visualization. They tell stories that way. They then create events and symposium and community engagement around those events. So the Texas Tribune is really one of the better ones. NPR just hired this guy, Brian Boyer, from the Chicago Tribune, who started something that was funded by the Knight Foundation called the Panda Project, which the whole idea was to make data visualization and telling stories through data easier and more accessible. So he created that Panda Project too. So that's another good place to be looking at it.
Okay, think of this as our Pechacucha round, so 20 seconds.
I'll take this right to the local level and give a plug to Chris Lovett, Boston Neighborhood News TV, great journalist. Chris has a wonderful blog as well, civicboston.blogspot, I believe, and he does amazing work every election cycle, looking at the historic trends and turnout and demographics, and he's done amazing work as well in the foreclosure in the real estate market. He has a keen understanding of the city's history, and he's a wonderful voice.
I think the universities, I don't know if this is on, but I think the universities are doing a great job in helping journalists. We're working with the computer scientists at BU to scrape data on some websites, and students at MIT in the artificial intelligence division. And I agree with John, Texas Tribune, they've developed a revenue stream off of their data, and Brian Boyer, what the Panda Project does is, for reporters, it's great, because you can dump all your different data sets in and hook them together. So say you can dump in campaign contributions with public employees, but it just makes it much easier to, when you're on deadline, you can just do a really quick scrub of somebody. So
It's open source.
it's great. Panda Project is great.
And as John noted as well, it's another open source project, and it just has WeViz.
I like people like James Jennings, who was at another engagement this evening. I was hoping that he would be here, but Professor James Jennings, as well as Charles Ogletree, Professor Charles Ogletree in the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute out of Harvard. And then in terms of journalism, Chris Ferrone from the Boston Phoenix I like, who has a funky and irreverent style, but definitely gets the job done a lot. And then too, there's this little engine that could, the Blackstonian.
I already counted you among the success stories.
All right, yeah. No, and really though too, because one of the things about us is that we do this with absolutely, there's no budget, there's no nothing. This is just a group of people who are dedicated to it, and do it to bring forth this little level of truth. And we are grateful to have a lot of people who we work with this stuff, and we love it.
Okay, so last question. This is your really short answer, but there's a lot of people in this room who are working with data in different ways, as we've seen in the projects that were presented earlier. There's people who have access to different kinds of data and are looking for ways to create stories and ways to kind of connect and be able to tell those stories in a better way. What's kind of the key piece of advice you would have for folks who kind of have the data at their fingertips and want to figure out how to get it out there, whether through you or on their own?
I think most journalists approach data the same way they approach any other piece of information. They need to be verified, they need to be corroborated, they need to be checked. Just because they're numbers doesn't mean they're true. So that's really important.
I'd say you gotta put a face on it, and we need to see how this impacts our local community. The Boston Globe did a wonderful job with their coverage of the school assignment process and the deep flaws in the system that we currently have by just talking to the families that were going through it and are still going through it. And I think that was a really good example of data-driven story as well, because that's all about the numbers too.
I would just agree with these guys that, that
The data might look one way to you, but we have to go really, really deep. We have to get the story behind those numbers, and that is really challenging sometimes. So I guess I'm agreeing with John. I would be skeptical sometimes of what the numbers say, but at the same token, we would love to hear any story ideas.
And I would just say that, people who have this data, this is what I'm so excited about this open source, is, man, open up the treasure chest. Don't be an information hoarder. We live in the information age. This stuff should be out there in the collective consciousness. Boston Globe at least allow community nonprofits or people like me who do community journalism, at least give us free access to the archives so I could do some real research. A free LexisNexis account would be nice too. Something like that. We just need more sources of this information to be free flowing so that the people can really do what they need to do with the info.
Great. Well, I want to thank our panel for coming up here. And initially we were going to do more Q&A in here, but the time is running late. It's warm in here. There is food and drink out there, so it's kind of a no-brainer. Thank you all for coming.